This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Starting today's show is Roger McEowen, K-State and Washburn law professor, with information about a recent case involving a Canadian farmer agreeing to a contract with a thumbs-up emoji. Helwig Farms quarter-scale tractor team advisors Ed Brokesh and Ryan Zecha and team members Taylor Schroeder and Joseph Kueker continue the show to discuss their recent success at an international quarter-scale tractor competition. Completing today's show is K-State's Beef Cattle Institute's Ask the Experts. This week's experts Brad White, Brian Lubbers, and Megan Rolf hold a conversation about picking bulls to reduce calving issues. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start this Wednesday show with some agricultural law information. And then to talk about that information, as always, we're joined with K-State and Washburn law professor Roger McEowen. Roger, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be with you, Shelby.
A topic that I find pretty interesting, a farmer accidentally signed a contract with an emoji.
It goes to show you how easy, in some instances, it is to form a contract. And sure, it wasn't funny to him because there were thousands of dollars involved in this. And what this is it was a standard forward grain contract situation. And what we had was a grain terminal elevator in Canada. Now, this is a Canada case, but same principles would apply here, and we'll talk about that as we go on. But the terminal elevator contacted a group of farmers and said, hey, we're offering to buy your flax this fall at $17 per bushel. They were actually buying it on the tonnage, but it broke out to $17 per bushel. And one farmer responded, and so the elevator followed up with telephone conversations with him, and he said, basically, send me a contract. So the elevator drafted a contract. They signed it in pen and ink, took a picture of it, and then sent the picture by text message to the farmer. And he responded to that text message by sending a text message back with a thumbs-up emoji. Well, what happened was when time came to deliver the flax in the fall, months down the road, time for delivery, the market price had risen to $41 per bushel. And, of course, now he wants to be able to sell his flax to somebody else for $41 per bushel and not be locked into a contract to sell at $17 per bushel. And so he refused to deliver. The elevator said, hey, you owe us the flax we bought for $17 per bushel. They've got to go out and cover that contract in the market at $41 per bushel, and they charged the difference back to him. And it amounted to almost $80,000 in damages. And the court said, yeah, there's a contract.
And Roger, talking about the $17 a bushel to the $41 a bushel and how that deals with forward contracting and the farmer's responsibility.
Yeah, that's a good question. When you get into forward contracts, Shelby, you're always at risk that the price of the commodity is going to rise between the time you entered into the contract and the time for delivery. And that risk is upon the farmer seller. So some basic principles would be, basically don't do 100% of your crop on a forward grain contract. Make sure you're covered some way. You cover that risk somehow, whether that's insurance of some type or whatever, but make sure you understand that you're going to bear the risk of that price going up. And even if that crop fails, if that contract doesn't specifically identify the land on which that crop to be delivered is grown, you're responsible. You can't get out due to casualty to crop because of weather. Very few forward grain contracts will specifically denote the tract on which the grain to be delivered is to be grown. So just a couple of other points to be careful with when you're getting into forward grain contracts.
And Roger, when that farmer sent that thumbs-up emoji, he meant for it to have an interpretation of one way. However, the grain terminal, that is not how they interpreted it.
Yeah, the farmer said, look, yes, I sent you a thumbs-up emoji. He couldn't deny that. That was there. It was in the record. But he said what that meant was, I received your text, not that I accepted your contract. The elevator said, no, you accepted this. In fact, you've done this kind of stuff in the past. We'll do this, and you reply with a text message saying, yep, yeah, okay. and this time you sent a thumbs up emoji. And the court thought that that was pretty probative in terms of the evidence, saying that there's kind of a course of dealing here, a past practice that these parties have had. And based on this, we think that thumbs up emoji meant that he accepted the contract. And what you have to have, Shelby, in contract law is an offer and an acceptance of that offer, and reasonably identifies the terms. Here we knew $17 per bushel. We knew it was flax. We knew the delivery date. And based on all of these facts, including prior times these parties had contracted, they said thumbs up emoji was enough to seal the deal. So
this is a Canadian farmer, however, still relates to things in America.
Yeah, we have basically the same rule here. We call it the merchant's confirmatory memo rule in the United States. If a merchant, a grain elevator, for example, follows up an oral conversation with a written contract, written memorandum, for example, you've got 10 days to reject that. Basically, rule's a little bit more complex than that. And if you don't do anything, if you don't reject it, you can be held to that. So it's somewhat similar to that. And his only argument in this case in Canada would be that, look, I'm not a merchant in grain, and so I didn't really accept this. But still, he did something affirmative. He sent a thumbs-up emoji, so I think that would still sink him. But it's kind of like the way we do it here in the United States. And under the grain trade rules in the United States, all it takes in this situation is a confirmation. It doesn't even require a contract, a full-blown contract, so to speak, just confirmation. I think that thumbs-up emoji in the United States with respect to grain is going to be enough.
And here in the 1950s in America, we had a similar case where two separate parties came into a contract, each with a different interpretation of what that contract actually held.
Yeah, we sure did. This was went to the Virginia Supreme Court in 1954. The case is Lucy against Zimmer. And Zimmer had a farm. He also ran a gas station convenience store out in the country, or had a restaurant in it. And on a Christmas Eve, Lucy comes in, and these guys, Lucy had been wanting to buy Zimmer's farm for years. And Zimmer would always say, no, you don't have the money. I'm not going to mess with you. But here Lucy comes in on a Christmas Eve, and these two guys start drinking and talking about the farm. And Zimmer gets tired of it. And so to call his bluff, he said, well, you don't have the $5,000 down payment that is required, or you don't have the down payment to buy my farm for $5,000. And he said, yeah, I do. And he said, no, you don't. You don't even have that amount of money. He said, yes, I do. So out of frustration and to get Lucy to go away, Zimmer takes a restaurant check, turns it over, scribbles out, I hereby agree to sell the Ferguson farm. He identifies this farm by name to Lucy for $5,000, so forth and so on, takes it up to his counter. When he shows it to Lucy, he said, you need to have your wife sign that. He said, oh, for crying out loud. Takes it up to the counter where his wife is the cashier, has his wife sign it, and Lucy tenders the down payment, said, now, convey me the farm. He said, no, it's just a joke. We were just bluffing each other. We're just two drunks, as the court said, high as a Georgia pine. Well, the court looked at this and said, Lucy reasonably believed that you were serious, and objectively you conducted yourself like you were entering into a contract. He thought you were serious. It's not what you, Zimmer, as the seller, thought you meant. It's what Lucy, as the buyer, reasonably believed what you meant. And he, we think, had a reasonable, objective belief that you were intending to sell your farm, and you sold it.
And in this case in contract, basically someone just came out with a farm for only $5,000?
Yeah, and it wasn't just 5 acres or 10 acres either. It was a sizable amount of acreage. But even back in the 1950s, he got a pretty sweet deal on a farm. So you got to be careful when you're negotiating contracts.
Roger, you've mentioned a few things that farmers and ranchers and just people in general should keep in mind when discussing contracts or possible contracts. And so what are the few of those other things that people should keep in mind, even outside of maybe not consuming alcohol and sending emojis to grain terminals?
Well, one is keep alcohol out of the deal. But you have to have an offer and an acceptance as to the core contract terms. So we know that we're buying flax. We know that we're buying a farm. And we know when the delivery date is. Price can even be set later. You don't have to set price. but we have an objective manifestation of intent as to the core contract terms. And that's really your key formation of a contract. And in past dealings, course of dealing, business practices, if the parties have dealt with each other in the past, that all becomes important in determining whether the current situation leads to the formation of a contract.
What are a few things that farmers and ranchers really should keep in mind?
Well, one is just be careful. Be careful when you're entering into these deals. Farmers and ranchers, we like to get into informal agreements. We tend to skip the formalities of a written deal. Certain types of oral conversations can rise to the level of a binding contract. Now, if you're not dealing with goods that are subject to another rule involving merchants, or if we're involving real estate, you have to have some sort of writing. But what the case law shows, what that Virginia case shows, is that it doesn't have to be a formal contract, so to speak, in writing. It can be something scribbled out on the back of a restaurant check, and you've got a binding contract. And that can go for lease agreements, too. So just be really careful. Make sure you are understanding what you're getting into and you get the terms that you want. And don't try to bluff people. Don't say things and don't put them in writing that you're not intending. And be careful with digital communication. Digital communications nowadays, that's the same as pen and ink. So we've got to realize that. And that's just something that's new over the past 10, 15, 20 years. But digital communications you can form a contract just about as easily with that as you can with a pen and paper or ink and paper.
Roger, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and discussing how little things like a simple thumbs up emoji could make a contract enforceable.
Thanks, Shelby. My pleasure.
That was Kansas State University and Washburn Law Professor Roger McEowen. If you'd like to learn more about his work, you can do so by going to washburnlaw.edu/Walter. It will be linked in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned back into Agriculture Today, and we continue our show now discussing K-State's Helwig Farms quarter-scale tractor team. And this summer, they competed at the 26th Annual American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers International Quarter-Scale Tractor Student Design Competition. And to talk about it, we're joined by advisor for the team, an assistant professor in K-State's Carl and Melinda Helwig Department of Biological and Agricultural Engineering, Ed Brokesh, and project manager and lead team advisor Ryan Zecha. They're also joined by students in biological system engineering with the machine option, Taylor Schroeder and Joseph Kueker. So getting started, Ryan, could you talk about what is Helwig Farms quarter scale tractor team?
Sure. So when they say quarter scale, it truly is quarter scale. So we are designing, testing, building, and competing with a new tractor from scratch every year. So we go through the same development cycle that the major ag manufacturers do, but just in a quarter scale. So the students do their own CAD design on computers. We build prototypes. We do testing in the lab and out in our test track. And then we build a final tractor and take it to the competition to compete against other schools in our fields.
Yeah, and some of those other schools are like Texas A&M, Iowa State, Ohio State, Penn State, University of Nebraska, named schools, and a few schools out of Canada, such as McGill, Manitoba. There's an Israeli team that comes every once in a while. And so it truly is an international competition.
Sounds like quite a few different people coming in for the 26th annual quarter scale tractor competition. And so what is encompassed in the competition?
Sure. So we start out with a written report. It goes out in April that outlines our design and our target market and things like that. And then we go, when we're actually at the competition, there's an oral presentation. We compete in performance events that include maneuverability, durability, and then a traditional tractor pull like you would see at the state fair. And then they're also design judged on safety, ergonomics, manufacturability. It's a pretty thorough competition, and it's all judged by professionals in industry that volunteer their time to come to the competition. So we're talking about people from John Deere, Case, Caterpillar, Kubota, Great Plains, Vermeer. I mean, everywhere that the students want to work at, we have representatives on site at the competition.
Once the students that go to the competition have an opportunity to talk to recruiters and potential colleagues for once they get a job and go out and work and join the manufacturing world or the design world for ag equipment, all the majors are there and represented, and they're at a more at ease things that you can go and get a conversation started with somebody from John Deere that, if you're interested in working for John Deere, you can go up and talk to a John Deere engineer and get to know what it's really like instead of waiting to go to a career fair and talk in a period of time where it's really stiff and not very, I won't say it's not friendly, but it's just not as relaxed as it is in the quarter scale competition.
And at this recent competition, this team placed second. So congratulations out of sounds like some very tough competition. And so Joseph, Taylor, however, the team had to overcome some adversity. And so Taylor, starting with you, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So on second night of the competition, we went in and we actually had catastrophic failure in one of the shafts in our main transmission. And so we had to come up with a way to compete the next day and then compete again in the polls. So that was an experience for sure. It was a long night. We were able to compete in all the events and competition. I definitely don't think we would have had we not been as, I think our advisors, their motivation and everything, they definitely kept us on track. Took a long drive to Chicago in order to complete that mission, but in the end, I just think we were able to push through, and it turned out well for us.
And Joseph, coming to you now, kind of what was the feel of the team, and was there some relief when everything worked out together?
In that moment where the shaft broke, it was very hard not to just hang up our hats and call it a day, but everybody decided we're doing really well at competition so far. We need to keep going. And so we were able to kind of patch everything together and get it working for the next day. And then while they were competing in the maneuverability and durability events, Dr. Brokesh and I wound up driving, I think it was 2.5 hours to Chicago to go pick up a new shaft from McNester car. And we brought it back and were able to get it installed later that evening and compete in the polls and do really well.
Taylor, Joseph, you're both currently students at Kansas State University and are going to be involved with the team again next year as officers. And so obviously you guys have both put a lot of work into the Helwig Farms quarter scale tractor team. And so how do you see this applying to your future?
Well, I've kind of seen through the stuff I'm doing with the tractor team, and then now I have a design engineering internship with Great Plains. I can see that there's a lot of skills that are overlapping there that I've learned on the team, and now I'm applying in my internship.
I would agree. I would just piggyback off what he said. I think he pretty much nailed it on the head. It's good to see. So I'm at AGCO here in Heston, same deal, design internship. It's interesting to see there's a lot of people around that were on either K-State's team. There's several Nebraska alumni around. And so that you see a lot of other alumni around that run and competed in this competition before. So.
And Taylor, Joseph, you guys are both biological system engineering with the machine option majors. However, there are other majors that are involved with this team.
Yeah, there's a few. We have a couple of electrical engineers as well as there's a few mechanical.
There's ag tech management is another big major on the team. It's kind of the sister degree to what Taylor and I are doing. It's in the BAE department with us as well.
We would like to mention that there are more people on this team other than just Taylor and Joseph. However, obviously you two are very important. As Joseph, you helped make that trek to Chicago, which was a key factor in having a successful competition this past year. However, Ed, Ryan, as you work with these students and hopefully help to make them create a successful quarter scale tractor, what is it like seeing those students create collaboration and foster new ideas?
Well, I mean, we advise, but, ultimately it's what the students decide to do. But we're always there to answer questions and provide some guidance. But I mean, in the end, it's up to the leadership team I mean, it depends on the year and the students. A lot of times they'll break down in subgroups, and we have people working on drivetrain and other people working on the frame and other people working on the ergonomic side of things. And then we have a test group traditionally. And I mean, again, it's all these subgroups that you see in industry. So they are, and you heard the students say earlier too. I mean, they're seeing the overlap on their internships.
I go around and I deal with a lot of recruiters. They come to me and will tell me that, we look for students that have been a part of the quarter scale tractor team. And those people that are part of that are pushed to top of the pile resumes, if you will, of candidates that recruiters look at. So involvement with the tractor team, while it's a lot of work, it really pays off to the students in internships. And I would argue to some extent what Taylor and Joseph are doing this summer is in part to their involvement with the tractor team over the last several years. So it pays dividends immediately, but long term it pays really big dividends.
And so what makes you guys excited for next year?
I think one of the biggest things I'm excited for is just kind of taking over the tractor. Obviously, last year, the seniors, they were kind of in charge. So I think it's going to be fun to kind of take what they did and run with it and see what we can do.
Kind of go off what Taylor said. Yeah, it's like we've been kind of developing this style of transmission over the past couple of years, and it performed really well last year. And so it's kind of exciting just to iron out a few more things on it and just see how well it's going to perform.
From an advisor standpoint, I mean, it's been a long road to recover post-COVID. Our numbers were down quite a bit. Now we're finally getting into a rebuild year, but we're kind of in our COVID cliff. Like all of our the students that were a freshman during that time period would be seniors now. And so we really aren't going to have any seniors on our team. So Joseph and Taylor, they're our president and vice president. They're juniors next year. So they're going to be taking on a lot. And yeah, so we're excited that our numbers are coming up and we're getting leadership to carry forward in future years, and it should pay off at competition for us next year.
Gentlemen, thank you all so much for taking the time to join me today and discussing the Helwig Farms quarter scale tractor team success at the recent quarter scale tractor competition. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was advisor for the team and assistant professor in K-State's Carl and Melinda Helwig Department of Biological and Agricultural Engineering, Ed Brokesh. He was joined by project manager and lead team advisor Ryan Zecha. They were both joined then by K-State students majoring in biological system engineering with the machine option, Joseph Kueker and Taylor Schroeder. I'll link the team's website in today's show notes, as well as a news release that discusses their second place finish at the 26th Annual American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers International Quarter Scale Tractor Student Design Competition. You can find those links in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. Tuned back into Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Wednesday show with K-State's Beef Cattle Institute's Ask the Experts. Today's experts are Brian Lubbers, Megan Rolf, and Brad White.
Hi, welcome to BCI Ask the Experts. I'm Brad White, and I'm happy to be joined by two good experts today, Dr. Brian Lubbers and Dr. Megan Rolf, who is a geneticist with Kansas State Animal Science. And today's question comes from a listener worried about calving in heifers and cows, and how can we use expected progeny differences to pick bulls that will lead us to no calving problems. Megan, I'm going to go to you first.
Okay, well, I would say the first thing we want to do is maybe think about managing our heifers and cows differently. So for heifers, I would go in and choose a high accuracy bull with a high calving ease direct EPD. And for cows, I would be a little bit less concerned about that. We certainly don't want calving difficulty, but calving difficulty incidences in cows are far lower than heifers. So at that point, I probably want the largest calf I can get that I don't have to pull.
Absolutely. One you don't have to intervene with. So good start for Megan, 5 points. Brian?
I completely agree with the guest on this one. So I agree. I think with the heifers, we want the high accuracy. I had not really thought of that, but you're right. Unpredictability in heifers is completely, as far as calving goes, is counter to everything we're trying to do. So a high accuracy bull, good calving ease. But I don't think that necessarily, don't think that necessarily means the lowest birth weight. And with cows, we've got a little more room to work there. Calving difficulty wouldn't be as common in cows. And so I think cows are the opportunity to focus on other EPD traits beyond calving ease and birth weight. And actually, we focus a lot on birth weight. We probably really should focus on calving ease, because we know if we have a really small calf, there's some negative impacts for long-term growth and weaning weights and things like that. So typically, right, there's a correlation. The smaller he is when he's born, the smaller it probably will be when he's weaned.
Okay, 5 points for Brian. Good answer. And I agree. So you're talking separating the heifers and the cows, focusing on calving ease. One of the things, Megan, I want to follow up with you. You mentioned calving ease direct. So can you differentiate calving ease direct versus calving ease maternal, and when I would use each trait?
Yeah, so calving ease direct is what we want to use when we want a small calf in that generation. Calving ease maternal is what you want to use when you're thinking about calving ease in the heifers that I keep as replacements.
So if I'm buying a bull and I want to be sure that his calves are born easily, calving ease direct.
That's exactly right.
And if I am buying a bull and I want to make sure that his daughters have an easy time calving, I'm thinking calving ease maternal.
Yes.
Excellent. So a couple points there for clarifying. That's up to 7. Now, Brian, you mentioned calving difficulty and your concern, and let's focus on the heifers. What are some of the ways you mentioned accuracy, birth weight, the calving ease direct? What are some of the other ways you're going to use to prevent dystocia or difficult calvings?
I mean, we've talked about EPDs and, kind of the genetic strategy and the planning. And then after that, it's just the management part, right? So, and I think you kind of separated those into 2 separate stages, but you really have to think about them together. And so if I'm a full-time producer and calving becomes my job for a few months, that's a much different scenario than if I have a small herd and I'm a part-time producer and maybe I have another employment in town that takes me away from the farm. Those characteristics, like you said, accuracy, low birth weight, those become even more critical for the part-time producer, because that one dystocia, it's probably a smaller herd, so one dystocia carries more weight in that smaller herd, but B, the chance to intervene from a management side may not be as quick or as frequent, and so it kind of compounds it. So I think actually thinking about your management style or your production system should be considered when you're talking about those genetic tools. EPDs become even more important depending on what your operational situation is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. It has to be those genetic EPD indicators are not standalone. You have to combine it with your management. Great answers there. And the focus on calving ease direct when you're looking at trying to prevent those dystocias. Manage the cows and heifers separately. Thanks for joining us, Megan and Brian. Appreciate your input. As always, if you have questions for us, you can send them to bci@ksu.edu.
Once again, that was the Beef Cattle Institute's Ask the Experts. That's all I have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.